Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I surely appreciate your support. Guys, I build these videos for like-minded folks just like you and I to try to help us get to the finish line quicker, but more proficiently. I really like to do videos, guys, that are timely. In other words, what is in season, what we're looking at, what we're looking to do. I'm not talking about planting fall food plots right now, for example, in January. So thanks for joining us, guys. Today we're going to talk about the next step of prescribed fire for the whitetail habitat. Building this habitat to perform and to maintain it, I guess, right? It's one thing to design it, build it. It's another thing to maintain it. So that's what we're talking about today, guys. And what I want to focus on is this. I'm trying to spread the word, if you will, right? I'm trying to help folks understand buzzwords, topics, what they mean, how to implement them, and like I always say, more importantly, where to implement them, right? So today, guys, this topic falls just right there for us. So we have this prescribed fire topic, right? How do we go about doing it? We talked in the last video about, where and pertaining to some habitat pockets after you get the design created. What we're doing inside of those FSI areas after we get that accomplished. Today we're going to go a step further. Guys, there are two steps to this. There are two processes, two different pieces, if you will, that pertain to prescribed fire. We have woodland burning, which is interior of your woodlots, possibly your core if you own a property that has timber on it, woodland settings. And then there's the other side of it is the upland. So woodland and upland. The upland side of it, guys, is old feral fields and stuff like that we're going to talk about here. Switchgrass, CRP, stuff like that. So two different pieces of the puzzle, all covered, and it's a very great tool, right? All covered with prescribed fire. So let's get right into this one, guys. The woodland side of it here, one thing I want to focus on and help everybody understand, there's a process to get to the point of even burning a woodland setting. I think it's real easy and to get caught into a trap of flipping on a channel, whether it has something to do with deer hunting or it's just a forestry, channel that's talking about how to control invasives and stuff like that, and burn some of that leaf litter off the forest floor. No matter which one of those channels that you're watching, I think a lot of it doesn't go above and beyond and explain the process of how to really get the best bang for your buck, if you will, right out of that. So we're going to start this in the woodland setting right here, guys. Is the logging is something that we have to look at. If you own a property, let's say your core, you get the line of travel established. We know where we're building habitat before we just go willy-nilly start building it. Before we start any of this, we need to make sure that we understand that canopy has to be released through logging. If you're inside of that parameter of logging, we have to take advantage of that logging, guys, because that will release the canopy. Now, if you're not ready to log, then maybe you go right into the FSI standard of it and you start releasing the canopy. One way or the other, that canopy has to be released. Hack and squirt, kill cutting, double girdling, and not all of one. Maybe a combination of a multitude of those, but it has to be released, because here's where I want to start this, guys. If you go in a woodland setting and you burn just to release that leaf litter and think that you're going to, stimulate a bunch of forbs and forages, you're probably only going to get a bunch of grasses, if anything, because what happens is your thought process is right, but you're not releasing the canopy, and the leaf stock comes in, if you will, and it shades that area out and it's not producing, So it has to be a thought process, right? And before you even think about the fire, you have to open the canopy. I always like to talk about the logging potential first, then we go in. So one thing I want to touch on here real quick, guys, before that, one thing to remember with this whole idea, right? This whole spectrum that we're talking about. Fire was not created or brought to the surface, if you will, by mankind to do habitat work, right? That was implemented after. The reason that fire came to the plate and that folks started using fire dating back many, many, many years ago, right? The reason that they did that was to maintain and focus on in controlling invasives and that lower stage, that maybe that second, third canopy inside of woodland settings, to control that that low vegetation, if you will, to promote more growth to big beautiful timber. It had nothing to do with habitat. But as the deer world progresses, right, as habitat creations progress, that's what we picked up on this and realized that we can use this prescription in a woodland setting to stimulate some of this growth for better whitetail habitat, better habitat in general, but we're talking whitetail habitat right now. And that's how that all got created. So very important piece, guys, to help you understand. It wasn't first brought to the surface to go right after habitat. So it's a piece of the puzzle. It's a tool that we need to understand how to tweak that to make it do what we want to do, because that's not what it was created to do. So we got the logging mindset done, right? We know where to do that. It's in the core. Release the canopy. Then we go into these pockets, guys, and this ties right into FSI that I was speaking on that other video before this, guys. I'm not big into burning 20 acres. Let's say you do some logging and you own a 40 and your core ends up being 20 acres, right? 20, 25, 30 acres, whatever that is. A lot of folks, certain parts of the country, would burn that in sections, large sections, 5, 10, 20 acre pieces. Maybe when they're done, the whole thing is burnt. I'm not that guy. And the reason for that is, if you're a turkey hunter, maybe this will resonate with you. Hunting a deer, trying to hunt a white-tailed deer on a large landscape that's all the same is much like hunting a field turkey. Once that turkey gets out in that field, there's nothing, maybe a little contour, maybe a little edge, something like that, hay field versus, a sorghum field or something, cornfield. But other than that, there's nothing there to funnel him, right? There's nothing better in the spot you're trying to hunt to draw him out to that area. And that is the example that I use when we're talking about just burning large areas. Right thought process, but it needs to go a step further. You need to maybe burn 20, but not all in one chunk like we talked about on that last video. So then what we look at, guys, is now we're able to start looking at, okay, do I need prescribed fire? Like I talked about in the other videos, guys, the further north you go, the less you have to burn. And the reason for that is we're still, no matter where you're at in the country, it's still to keep low vegetation, good vegetation, green, and really palatable to make that spot attractive, right? So that woody browse doesn't get too tall and lose its attraction. The farther you go north, the less you have to do that, because we need our food taller in the northern regions than from where I'm at, like here in Kentucky South, right? Because the snow load isn't there. So if you have 2 foot of good vegetation here, a foot or two, boy, it's real palatable. Well, if you cover it up with snow in the north, they can't reach it. So that's where you just don't have to burn as much. So maybe it's every third year burn. Touching on that real quick, guys, what you don't want to do is don't burn. We're going to just draw this on here, right here. If you're 40, right, don't go in here and burn this year, this next year, this the year after, and this piece here, on year 4. I see that a lot, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of a sudden we start back over. What that does, guys, is that's like having a different food source, and it is a different food source, but like a different food plot program all the way around your property. This matures and this matures. What you want to do is you want to burn all these pockets that we speak of through FSI and our habitat pockets, our doe bedding areas and stuff like that. When you do this, you want to do this all the same year, right? This piece that I've got right here, guys, ties into the rest of this. The reason that we are backing these fires through these areas, no matter where you're at in the country, but when you decide to burn, the year I recommend burning, the time, per my designs, the way I design is when you mulch out your transition in your grid, so your transition in your corridors, great fire breaks, right? The perfect time to do that. So is it every year in the South? Maybe. Is it every third year in Michigan, you know, Wisconsin, New York, Minnesota, something like that? Probably. So what we want to do, guys, though, your woodland fires are much hotter than your upland burns. And the reason for that is we need to, there's a lot of that fuel, and if you back a fire real quick, you put the wind and the fire in the wrong direction, we don't want that wildfire aspect, right? But it burns through real quick.
This is a head fire. The wind is blowing this way, obviously. See how much higher the flames are? Burning the same exact thing as this backing fire. A lot less than that.
That's why we back these fires into the wind. We start them on a fire break and back them into the wind and let them eat all that fuel because they get real hot. The hotter it gets, to a certain extent, it gets real hot, you're stimulating that. You're not going to kill it. It's hard to kill that woody stock or that seed bank in the ground, but you're stimulating all of that. That's the heat level has to be more than it is out in an upland setting that we're going to talk about. So keep that in mind, guys. Then you get to that point, okay? You get to the point of maybe you did some logging, maybe you did some FSI, you tipped some trees down, you kill cut some trees, you hack and squirt some areas, combination of everything. Then you get in here and you start looking. In the South, because of the long growing seasons, maybe you don't need, because you don't need side cover, you don't need thermal protection, you know what I mean? You've got, your food isn't getting covered up with snow. In the north part of the country, we from Kentucky North, right? You start looking at the potential, Tennessee, Kentucky North, you start looking at the potential, do I need hinge cuts? And that's where that comes in. What I like to do, guys, is get that area prepped, then put some hinge cuts down if it needs it. If it doesn't need it, then just go to hinge cutting, right? But if you do need to back that fire through there, back it through there first, then tip some down because you're not potentially damaging that tree. It's very susceptible to, disease and heat and stuff like that, drought, when you make them hinges. And that cambium layer, sometimes with that heat, just, it's only 3 foot off the ground. And even more so the top that you're putting on the ground, you guys, to feed deer. We just don't want to overheat it and kill the tree. So maybe burn it first, then tip it down. And if you have to burn every year, then like I said, maybe you can accomplish it without hinges. You can do it with the fire past or through a hinge. Just maybe make sure that you blow some leaves out around them hinges or something like that, so the fire just doesn't sit there and bake that area. So something to keep in mind. So that, guys, that prescription for the woodland, that's why we do that. Big topics on this one is make sure you burn it hotter and make sure that you're removing the canopy before you even attempt to do this, or it's all for none. So the next step here, guys, is the upland setting. Fire, it's still fire, right? But totally different mindset, totally different mentality when we're doing this. So what I like to start with is, if you have an upland setting that you're doing, maybe you have both on a farm. I like to have both on a farm because then that shows that you have a lot of diversity, right? But what we're looking for in this upland setting is we're looking for, to start the process, okay, these feral fields, right? What do we do with them? What is our goal? So maybe to start this process, if you're heading down the road of native grasses like switchgrass, big blue stem, little blue stem, a CRP program, something like that, think ahead, right? So can you accomplish this by just burning and not having to use herbicide to start that application? Maybe. I like to do is reach out to like John Comp, and then he'll get it, if he doesn't have the answer for you, then he's got great connections with Reed, Samson there, and those guys that really offer that specialty switchgrass mindset. John's great with it as well. Brad Harper's another one. You got a lot of questions about that, contact Brad directly. Brad can answer them. Them guys do this all the time on farms, right? So in big settings all across the country, they're working with different landscapes, different folks, different farms, such as I am. I'm more on the design and the build part of it, right? And they're the specialty, the seed specialist, if you will, the soil specialist. So the perfect thing, maybe, if you have time, you look at it and you start prescribing a liquid application. In other words, a chemical application, spraying that down with herbicide the fall before you're going to do this. Now, if it's a property you just picked up and the time doesn't allow, then maybe burning is the first step. But maybe spray the area, get it prepped, so you're setting back weeds, you're really getting a good clean slate. Then these farrow fields, guys, where we're implementing more of this stronger upland setting, then we start talking about going through and backing this fire through those areas. So, same idea. You still need the fire breaks. You still need a good plan, leaf blowers, fire breaks, because different than a woodland setting, an upland setting, there's a lot more wind usually out in these fields, right? So you need to pick the right day. You need to watch your dew points. You need to hire someone that knows what they're doing if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself. And you need to watch the wind because, guys, it can get out of control. The wind can come up in these areas real quick and surprise you, right? So this is what I have tied to here. This is hot, guys. This is not. You don't have to burn the upland setting as hot. You still want it to get warm. Don't get me wrong. Hence the word fire, right? But it's not as important to get it as hot because you're not looking to, spark up that rootstock, that woody browse, that seed bank, if you will, unless it's a situation where you're not looking for, to keep it pure and clean for your access. If you want to burn your areas and put switchgrass in, a native grass, component for the screening to get past, you don't want food in it, right? So those areas don't burn as hot. Right, so your screening areas are pure, no food, switchgrass banks, and you don't want food in it. So don't burn those as hot. If it's a situation where you're reclaiming and you're making bedding and you want forbs and forage pocketed through there or amongst the switchgrass, then burn it hotter because you're going to stimulate that seed bank. So just a tip there, something that I've used in the past. We used to do a lot of this in Illinois when I was living down there. Big blue stem, little blue stem was huge back then, and then all of a sudden we kind of switched in more to a more durable, if you will, structure. The new switchgrass programs and stuff. Like I said, reach out to John and Brad about that. They can dial you in on that. Which one is best for you? It all depends on the soil, right? The seed right here, guys. This is what we're talking. Now we look at once we have that clean slate. Then what a lot of folks elect to do is drill is best and or broadcast over those areas. You put your seed into that ash right before some good rains, whether it's drilled or broadcast like we said. Now all of a sudden you have this clean slate. The reason that a lot of these things fail, especially switchgrass, is folks just aren't patient enough with it and you don't do enough pre-game prep. That's what I find, right? So be patient, go the extra mile. It can be very, very, very helpful on a property. You just have to know what you're getting yourself into. You need to know the parameters of which where you're trying to go, right? Screening and or bedding, right? Which one are you? Because they're not together. Then once you get that established, what I find, guys, is I find that a lot of folks will, year one, year two, like I said, Brad is a good one to answer these questions. Get a hold of him and ask him, okay, at what point should I mow this switchgrass? Because you can compete, you can out-compete, I guess I should say, right? Some of your weeds and stuff that are competing. Switchgrass doesn't like competition, so we're trying to set the nastiness back, the weeds and the grasses out of it and keep it more switchgrass, right? So mowing, then what I find is maybe after that stand is pure and it starts losing its viability, it starts losing its backbone, if you will, depending on the year, or the seed, and the years we're talking about, is it year 6, 7, 8, 9? It all depends the region that you're in and what seed we're actually dealing with, right? What species. What I find is that's the time then to back the fire through that, because guys, it's a rhizome at that point, right? It's not going to kill it. It's in the rootstock at that point. So then what you do is you back the fire back over that, and you're stimulating it again. You're getting all that trash gone, and you're letting that regrowth. That's when all of a sudden I feel, like I said, going back to the days in Illinois, that's when I feel your switchgrass or your CRP and stuff like that blows up, because now it's healthy. It's been there. It's got a rootstock established. Them rhizomes are really helping, are really, are mature, and all of a sudden you back that fire through that thing. And now you're talking about 2, 3 foot, 4 foot growth in a year, 5 foot. I mean, it's beautiful, right? Again, this one doesn't have to be as hot, because unless it's let's wake up the rootstock for bedding. If it's just screening, it doesn't have to be as hot. So this could be hot or not as hot, right? This, most of the time, your woodland settings are that you need a slow back through fire, because if you try to force a fire through an area, guys, one, you don't want to do that, but two, if you do happen to try to do that, what's happening is you're not damaging that, silver dollar stuff I talk of, or smaller, that just, you don't kill it and you don't let it go, and then it just, comes back with that second or third canopy, and you don't get the full burn off effect, right? You have to heat the ground up, you have to kill the vegetation that we're looking to kill and set it back, and then you're off and running on that. The last thing that we're going to talk about here, guys, is timing. When do you burn, right? So in a woodland setting, the timing, I like to burn when it comes to deer hunting, guys. I like to burn earlier, like late winter, early spring. And the reason for that is, depending on where you're at in the country, you have the entire growing season for that to get back healthy and viable. The further north you are, the earlier you should probably burn. But in a woodland setting, guys, something to keep in mind is this. The later you burn, so the earlier you burn, I think you'll get more strength with forbs, forages, browse, right? The later you burn, I think it's a warm season burn, if you will. What happens is you're going to stimulate a lot of grasses, right? So what are you looking for? Now, here's something to keep in mind. The later you burn, the more palatable, the fresher. It's just like planting a fall food plot for fall attraction, right? The later you burn in the year, the more palatable that's going to be. But there's a problem with that. The further north you go, maybe it doesn't have time to get there, and then you cover it up with harsh conditions, or it freezes and it dies, and you're left with not enough. So gauge that where you're at in the country, guys. Just remember, it is more palatable the closer you burn, or later you burn into the summer, closer to season. But in most cases, I find it's best to burn like before spring green up, or right at spring green up. You can't do it after spring green up a lot, because it's green. It doesn't want to burn, right? So you have to do it early, an early season burn in most cases. So these are the tips, guys. One of the videos, it's very in-depth. We could talk for hours on this topic, but I really hope that this helps shed some light on this situation. And at the end of the day, guys, we're going to move on to other things here, going into more TSI and FSI strategies on what to do, where to do it, when to do it, how to do it. So the fire thing is something to keep in mind, but here you go, guys. Make sure, I can't stress this enough, make sure that you have the right tools, you have the fire breaks, you have the equipment, you have the manpower. Don't tackle these projects by yourself, guys. It's a very great tool, but it can get out of control. And the last thing you want to do is be that person in the neighborhood, one, that gets hurt yourself, but two, the fire gets out of control, and you burn the whole community. You don't want that to happen, and Lord, willing, that you don't hurt somebody yourself or somebody else in the process, or dwellings or anything like that. So don't let somebody tell you don't need, you need all hinge cuts, you don't need anything else. You only need hack and squirt, nothing else, because there's a time and a place for everything, and fire is exactly what we're talking about here today, guys, and that is exactly another point there. There's a time and a place for fire. Not everybody needs it. You don't have to do it, but it's a great tool if and when and where you need it. Thanks, guys.